Why did Doctor Strange lie to Tony Stark in Infinity War? Well, it wasn't really a lie in the traditional sense. It was more of a calculated choice, a secret kept for the sake of something much bigger. Picture this. Doctor Strange, standing alone in the vastness of time, eyes glowing as he peers into over 14 million possible futures. Each one is like a thread, weaving through the tapestry of destiny. He searches desperately, knowing that the stakes couldn't be higher. The fate of the universe hangs by a thread. And after all his calculations, there's only one future where they win against Thanos. Just one. No, he doesn't share that with anyone. Not Tony, not anyone. Why? Because he knows that telling the truth, revealing too much, could shatter everything they've been working toward. Imagine if Tony knew that his life, the one that was in such danger at the hands of Thanos, was the key to victory. That knowledge could alter everything, make them hesitate, maybe even make Tony act differently in that moment when Thanos was about to kill him. For those of you who have already subscribed over the last couple of months, thank you guys so much. We've been gaining subscribers here at Maxiverse Twist, and if you have not already, I also noticed that 99.6% is watching in this channel have not yet subscribed already. I would just kindly invite you to do so. It's like the #1 thing you can do to support me as a content creator in the channel. And of course, you gotta be subbed to see more latest updated videos. Instead, Strange does something unexpected. He sacrifices the Time Stone to Thanos. He makes it look like a surrender, a loss. To Tony, it must have seemed like a moment of hopelessness, of giving up. And yet, in the back of Strange's mind, he's playing a far more dangerous game. One where the stakes are far greater than they can even understand at that point. Doctor Strange isn't lying because he enjoys deception. He's lying to protect the future. He knows that the only way to win this war is by keeping certain things hidden. By giving up the Time Stone, he ensures that Tony Stark survives and that in turn keeps the one path to victory alive. It's a decision made with the weight of the entire universe on his shoulders. And when Tony, years later, finally makes the ultimate sacrifice in Endgame, Doctor Strange's earlier choice makes sense. He wasn't being deceitful. He was playing the long game, knowing that everything would come down to a single moment where Tony had to step up and do what needed to be done. In the end, it was never about lying. It was about trust. Strange trusted that, even in the darkest of times, Tony would do what was needed. And the one future where they win, it was all thanks to that trust. Why did Doctor Strange give the Time Stone to Thanos? Strange's decision to give up the Time Stone to Thanos in Infinity War is one of the most pivotal and confusing moments in the film. But it's also one of the most strategically brilliant decisions in the long run. At first glance, it seems like a major mistake. Why hand over such a powerful artifact to a villain who's literally trying to wipe out half the universe? The answer, though, lies in something much bigger. The vision of the one future where they win. The one future. Before the confrontation with Thanos, Doctor Strange uses the Time Stone to look into over 14 million possible futures. When he tells Tony Stark that they only win in one of those futures, he's referring to a single, highly specific path that ensures victory. Strange is not only trying to stop Thanos, he's working to set up a chain of events that leads to the best possible outcome. By giving up the Time Stone, Strange is not surrendering to Thanos. He's buying time and setting up the conditions for the one future where the heroes ultimately win. If he had kept the stone, Thanos would have killed Tony Stark, and this would have disrupted that future. Strange knew that Tony's survival was crucial. The long-term plan. Strange's decision was not based on the immediate moment. It was a long-term play. If he had kept the stone and tried to fight Thanos in that moment, it might have cost them everything. By giving the stone up, Strange ensures that Tony lives, and as we know from Endgame, Tony Stark plays the key role in defeating Thanos with his own sacrifice. In essence, Doctor Strange was acting on the belief that the ultimate victory was more important than any immediate success. By handing over the Time Stone, he preserved the timeline and allowed the Avengers to continue their fight, even if it seemed like a loss in the short term. The greater good. Another important factor is that Strange knew the stakes were greater than any single battle. The fate of the universe rested on a series of intricate events. He wasn't just thinking about defeating Thanos in that moment, but about how to achieve the greater good. It was a heartbreaking decision, one that cost him the Time Stone and ultimately the lives of many, including Peter Parker and the rest of the heroes in that moment. In the grand scheme, Strange's decision was a masterstroke. He was looking at the bigger picture, and his willingness to sacrifice in the short term, letting Thanos get the Time Stone, was part of the plan to ensure the Avengers would ultimately succeed in Endgame. So, Strange didn't really give up the Time Stone because he thought Thanos would be merciful. He gave it up because he knew only by making this sacrifice could they have any hope of winning in the end. It was, in a sense, a brilliant, almost fatalistic act of trust in the outcome he'd seen. Would you say it was a smart move, or did Strange have no other choice but to follow that one path? Did Doctor Strange know Tony Stark would survive? Definitely, yes. Doctor Strange definitely knew that Tony Stark's life was essential to the success of their plan. In fact, it was the central reason behind his decision to hand over the Time Stone to Thanos. At the moment when Thanos holds Tony by the throat, seemingly ready to end his life, Strange's choice is not an impulsive or desperate one. It's a calculated decision based on the knowledge he gained from looking into over 14 million possible futures using the Time Stone. When Strange says, "This is the only way," he's speaking from a place of certainty. He knows that allowing Tony to survive is critical to the one timeline where they win. Why Tony's survival was key. Doctor Strange saw only one future where the Avengers win, and Tony Stark's survival was the linchpin of that victory. Strange didn't share this with anyone because revealing the whole truth would have been too risky. Imagine if Tony had known that his survival was so vital, it could have affected his decisions in the moment, potentially making him more vulnerable or acting in a way that disrupted the timeline. Strange's choice to give up the Time Stone wasn't just about sparing Tony's life in the short term. It was about ensuring the timeline unfolded as it needed to. In the larger scheme, Strange understood that Tony had to be alive for the final confrontation with Thanos. Tony's survival was, in essence, the spark that set everything into motion for the victory that would come later in Endgame. A trust in the greater plan. Strange's move was also a sign of his trust, not just in the one future he had seen, but in Tony himself. Strange had witnessed countless scenarios, but in the only one where they succeeded, Tony Stark had to be the one to make the ultimate sacrifice and wield the Infinity Stones in Endgame. Without Tony's presence and actions, the Avengers wouldn't have won. It's worth noting that, although Strange knew Tony's life was crucial, that doesn't mean it was easy for him. The decision to give up the Time Stone was a heavy one. He could see the universe falling apart, people dying, and yet he chose to let it happen because he believed this was the only path to ultimate victory. It was a tragic moment, not only because of what it cost Strange emotionally, but because of the immense responsibility it placed on Tony's shoulders. Did Strange have any doubts? While we know that Strange was confident in his vision, the decision was also one that weighed heavily on him. Giving up the Time Stone meant Thanos would be one step closer to completing his mission, and it would cost the Avengers dearly. But Strange didn't seem to have any other viable option. The one future where they won was the one that required Tony Stark to survive, even if it meant allowing Thanos to get closer to his goal. It was a gamble, but Strange, being the master of the mystic arts, knew this was the only way. So, to answer the question, yes, Doctor Strange knew that Tony Stark's survival was critical for their success. He wasn't acting out of desperation. Strange was thinking long-term and making the difficult choice to ensure the timeline played out in the one way it could lead to victory. He trusted that Tony would ultimately rise to the occasion, even if it meant letting the universe suffer for a while. What do you think about Strange's decision? Do you think he could have shared more of the plan with the team, or was this the only way it could work? What was the one future Doctor Strange saw where they win? Doctor Strange's vision of the future was a crucial part of Avengers: Infinity War, and it's shrouded in mystery for a reason. He saw over 14 million possible outcomes of their confrontation with Thanos, but out of all those, there was only one scenario where the Avengers won, and in that future, Tony Stark played a central role. The exact details of the future Strange saw remain largely ambiguous, but we do know several key elements about it, especially regarding Tony's involvement. Why Tony? So, why Tony? Why was he the one who had to survive? And why was he the key to defeating Thanos in the one winning timeline? Tony's sacrifice. Doctor Strange knew that the victory would come only at a high price. The one future where they succeeded involved Tony having the courage to sacrifice himself by wielding the Infinity Stones. Knowing the immense toll it would take on him, this sacrifice was necessary to undo Thanos' snap and ultimately reverse the destruction he caused. While Doctor Strange could see the threads of this future, it was Tony who had to make the ultimate decision when the moment came. The Iron Man connection. Tony Stark's journey over the course of the MCU has been one of constant evolution. He started as a selfish, self-centered billionaire, but by the time Endgame comes around, he's become the selfless hero who's willing to put his life on the line for the greater good. His growth and his ability to make the hardest decisions in the direst moments, like when he made the choice to wield the Infinity Stones, made him the perfect person for the job. Strange knew that Tony had the heart and determination to do what needed to be done, no matter the cost. Strange's trust in Tony. Despite their friction and differences in Infinity War, Doctor Strange had a profound respect for Tony Stark. Even though Tony could be reckless and impulsive, Strange knew that Tony's brilliance and leadership would be crucial. Strange's decision to hand over the Time Stone was, in a way, an act of trust. He trusted that Tony would step up when needed, and that the path to victory was tied to his ability to make the sacrifice. If Tony survived, the Avengers would ultimately come together in Endgame to form a plan to undo Thanos' snap and stop him once and for all. The entire chain of events, from collecting the Infinity Stones to the final battle against Thanos, hinged on Tony's survival. But Doctor Strange had no way of knowing that every single step would unfold perfectly. He only knew the critical part of the timeline. Tony had to survive. It's also worth noting that this timeline was, in part, about more than just the heroes winning. It was about them finding a way to undo the irreversible damage Thanos had done. That required not only reversing the snap, but also defeating Thanos permanently. So, when Doctor Strange gives up the Time Stone to Thanos, he's not just saving Tony's life for a selfish reason. He's ensuring that the one timeline where they defeat Thanos is preserved. And when that moment arrives in Endgame, Tony Stark takes on the monumental task of undoing the snap, becoming the hero he was always meant to be. Do you think Strange's gamble was the right one? Could he have handled the situation differently? Or was this the only path to victory? That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe for more exciting Maxiverse twist content.